IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are live here on a Tuesday during a bye week, which means that we usually do a little bit of big picture stuff. And I actually think this is a perfect time for a little bit of big picture stuff as Notre Dame comes down the stretch, 7-3, 2 regular season games left in the season, and then obviously a bowl game that will follow there. But we know after watching the 31-23 loss to Clemson this past weekend, that was 24-9 at one point in that football game in the first half, that Notre Dame, there are some issues with this team right now. And there are things that we really want to hit on and be able to look. This is the reality. We need to understand that we need to accept the reality we're in and understand that we're not okay with being here, right? There's still growth that could happen for the rest of this season and into next season. We can't wallow in the pity of what 7-3 feels like right now. So we all need to understand and come to terms with this is a disappointing season. Whether Notre Dame wins their last 2 games, goes 9-3, wins a bowl game, gets 10 wins, first 10-win season under Marcus Freeman in his tenure so far, it's still a disappointing season. No matter how we cut it, no matter how we slice it, how we paint it, how national media paints it, whatever. But there is still things that Notre Dame can do heading down the stretch here that we can take into the offseason, into the future of the Notre Dame program, and feel like there's something that's being grown here and there's a foundation that's being built that is making us a little bit more optimistic for the year. Because if we ended the season today with how the offenses looked, with how they looked against Clemson, not many people would be very optimistic about the future of Notre Dame football. But there's still 3 games left to play. So we want to talk a lot about today what Notre Dame can do the rest of the season to at least show that not only can they finish strong, but the strength can be turned into positivity moving forward into what will be a very important offseason for Marcus Freeman after his second season going into his third. So, Brian, disappointing season. We all agree there's still growth that can happen. There's still hopefully some foundational positives that can come for the rest of the season. But Notre Dame is in a very interesting spot right now where I feel like, and I know you agree, you need to evaluate everything right now as this team and really start to understand what the main issues are. And we're going to talk mostly about offense today because that's really where most of the issues are as of today. We need to understand foundationally where this team is moving.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this team, Ryan, and offense is obviously the biggest issue. However, there's bigger picture issues as well that I think are affecting the offense more than the defense. And my fear, and we'll get into specifics with the defense, my fear is that if those foundational issues don't get addressed, the defense is going to be the one struggling through it next year when they lose all the veterans, or at least most of the veterans. We don't know if Riley Mills and Howard Cross are going to come back. We don't know if Jordan Patello is going to come back. We don't know if Nana is going to come back. We know Javonte Jean-Baptiste can't come back. We know, yep. I mean, the odds of Cam Hart coming back are slim. We don't know about right. We don't know about the 3 linebackers. DJ Brown's gone. So if those issues, you always have to wonder, were those issues masked on defense this year by the experience? That's why I say is like there needs to be foundational issues that are discussed first for Notre Dame to find out why are certain things happening, right? Why does this team have that random, who the heck is this moment? Like, that's not the team that I saw. Why is this team looking like that? And everybody does that to a degree, Ryan. Like, nobody is just every week. If Ohio State would have played against Rutgers like they played against Notre Dame, they'd have won that game a lot more convincingly. Right. Everybody does that. But for Notre Dame, it's just such this incredible highs and lows that you have to ask yourself, is there something bigger afoot that just hasn't made its way to the defense yet? And it reminds me a lot, Ryan, of 2015. And I remember watching that season, Ryan, and thinking, man, this team is so talented. And you just never felt like that team got the most out of their ability. There'd be moments here, moments there, but you could just see there were some foundational issues that, when you don't have Will Fuller and Jalen Smith and Kavari Russell and a lot of these guys that, Sheldon Day and a lot of these guys that could mask those issues.
Yep.
Your team game, you lost Ronnie Stanley. I mean, your team came out that next year, no Nick Martin, right? No Steve Elmer. And it was a completely different team as far as a result standpoint. But a big part of that was because, and I talked about this the whole offseason, there are foundational issues that the talent masked last year. Yeah. And I feel that is something we have to consider for Notre Dame this year. And it was especially true on offense because they didn't have the same experience or talent partly due to injuries. I mean, we haven't seen Jaden Thomas most of the year. We haven't seen Deion Colsey most of the year.
Yeah.
With all the issues that Notre Dame's having a receiver, you don't think we'd have seen a little bit more of Deion Colsey at some point in time with all those injuries were happening, And
I feel like Deion would have been a guy that would have just kind of like, you know what it remind me of? Not much more talented than this player, but you remember a couple years ago when Andrew Gustafa came in at guard and you were just kind of like, yeah, he just kind of righted the ship, right? Like he kind of stabilized everything. And Deion is obviously a much more talented version of that. But I think like if you had Deion, I feel like he would have just injected into your wide receiver core and you would have been like, yeah, you're just better because Deion's there, right? Like it would have stabilized things a little bit. So I agree. He was a player that not many people talked about when he went out with his knee injury, but that was actually a huge loss, I think, for this Notre Dame offense. He could have given you some stability as a veteran. I think he could have.
And partly because Chancey Stuckey wasn't using him even before the injury, but that's a different conversation for a later part of the show. So when you look at it, Ryan, you have to ask yourself, Marcus Freeman has to ask himself, are there some foundational things that I thought were going to be where this team is? Did I give too much leeway to my captains? Did I give too much leeway to my assistants? Did I not give enough leeway to my, it could be, did I micromanage too much? Did I not micromanage enough? Those are all things that Marcus Freeman has to look in the mirror and say, look, something happened this year and this team did not play to its potential. And it's not even about the record.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, I could have seen a scenario in which Notre Dame still lost 3 games and you came out of this saying, like, you know what, like that's a bummer and I'm disappointed, but this team showed a lot of potential and promise. We didn't see that, right? That's my concern. It's not so much about the record. It's how you got here. It's not so much the excuses that we've seen. Well, if we don't have this play here and that play there, I'm going to have an article coming out tonight or tomorrow, depending on how long I can stay conscious, that I'm going to talk about, for all the issues with the offense, the first thing that they got to fix is the ability to finish. If this offense simply could finish off drives, they're at worst 9-1 right now, at worst. I mean, think about it. You think about the Ohio State game, 2 times you turn it over on downs in the fourth quarter, on 4th down in Ohio State territory. Not being able to get the ball at the end and go do something with it. You think of the Louisville game, it's tied 7-7. Your defense gives you the ball deep in Louisville territory and you can't get anything but a field goal out of it, right? You think of the penalties. You just couldn't finish off drives and all of a sudden eventually Louisville pulls away. If you finish early against Duke, that's never a competitive. And this is the thing that frustrates me is because we can look at the numbers and the score and they needed a late score to get to 21. But it's like, that's what frustrates me because that should have been 21-0 at halftime. But they couldn't finish.
I feel like the Duke game is one that people misremember a little bit, and they just throw in the bucket of the offense was putrid all game. Where I'm just like, no, the offense was pretty good in the first half. They just didn't finish off drives. You had to settle for field goals, and it was just one of those situations where you didn't put your foot on their throat, right? Like you didn't put the nail in the coffin early in that football game. I mean, Notre Dame could have easily been down. I mean, they could have easily been up like 24 to whatever at halftime against Duke. And then Duke would struggle to obviously even get to that close to that margin, right? Because I mean, they only scored 14 points in that football game. So yeah, Notre Dame had a chance to really just put a stranglehold on the game at Duke. You let them stay around at halftime, and then they took momentum, obviously, from the third into the fourth quarter, and then you had the rally late, right? So there's still been some good mixed in with the perceived bad, but it's just been maddeningly inconsistent is the biggest thing, right? Especially offense. It's like,
right.
how
Same
do you
thing
go
with
from
Clemson too, Ryan. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man. Please.
Oh,
Go
no.
ahead. I didn't mean
I was just gonna say it's just like it's just insane to think how from one week to the next we could feel so optimistic, and then the next week it's down in the dumps and in the dumpster. And there's no in between ground with this program. That's how I feel like right now. I talked about this a few weeks ago. We had a great conversation about this, about stabilizing that floor, right? Like your best is up here, but your bad is way down here. It's like, no, there needs to be a middle ground. The best programs stabilize that floor, they bring it up, and then they still have the ceiling to work with, right? And I just feel like this team has not stabilized that floor. It's either pretty dang good or it's well below average. Like there's just no middle ground for this team right now, which is very frustrating.
It is. They either look like you. I think you nailed it, Ryan. I think that is just in general with the team as a whole. Even though the defense at times would play well, there were times they didn't play with the same kind of fire that they did in other games. Like the Ohio State game, that's a lot of fire, man. Right? You come out against USC, man, they were flying all over the field. And then you look at the Clemson game, and they didn't play bad against Clemson, but you're just like, how are they not up for this game right now? Like they were before. This is still Clemson. Yep. And when you're the head football coach, you got to be able to look in the mirror, as every coach has done at some point in time in his career. Kirby Smart had to do that in year 4 when they lost at home to 4-8 South Carolina, and they couldn't score points. He had to look in the mirror and say, okay, we are really good on defense, and we don't turn the ball over much at all, but we can't win. We're scoring 30.8 points per game. Oh yeah, they went 12-2, but Kirby's like, I don't care about 12-2. 12-2 is not our goal. Our goal is a national championship. So going 12-2, where we lose at home to South Carolina, get a little lucky against Notre Dame, barely beat Auburn, barely beat Texas A&M, and then get smacked by LSU. His thing is 12-2. I don't care about. Like, that's not the standard that I'm trying to implement. I didn't come here. I didn't leave Bama to come here and be almost a champion. I came here to be a champion. And what did he do? He went out and got Todd Monken, who had a completely different thought process on offense than what he had in the past. Now, they were still a team that liked to run the football and all that kind of stuff. That didn't change. But as far as understanding that you've got to be a really dynamic offense. They came out the next year, made a slight jump, against an all SEC schedule, and ended the season with a win over a really good Cincinnati team in a bowl game. And then the next year they came out, kicked the doors down a little bit. And then, of course, the last 2 years, they've been basically a 40-plus point per game team. So, I mean, everybody does it at some point in time. I mean, Nick Saban did it after multiple championships, right? After, 13 and 14, when they weren't winning, Saban went out and said, we got to make some changes. And they made those changes.
Yep, they sure did. I think that's because you need to have that growth mindset as a leader of a program, especially. I mean, we're talking about Marcus Freeman, who I've been honest about it, and I know you've been honest about it. I still have high expectations for Marcus Freeman. I still think that Marcus Freeman can do a lot of great things at Notre Dame. I think, though, that this is a moment, this is a season, this is a stretch of games now where it should be apparent to Coach Freeman, if he is that guy, that actions do need to happen now, right? Like there's some things that need to change. You cannot be complacent and just say, because some people are like this, right? Some coaches are just like, nope, we're just going to keep working the process. It'll change eventually. The results will change as we continue the process. And sometimes there's merit to it. Sometimes. But with Coach Freeman and this program right now, I would argue that there are several things, mostly on offense, but just structurally, that you're in a situation here where if you don't change, you don't adapt, you don't evolve, you're going to put a ceiling on this program. You're going to put a ceiling on it. The best coaches adapt. The best coaches evolve. You mentioned Kirby Smart. We talked about Nick Saban yesterday, as far as like Nick Saban's adapted several times in his career as an offensive coach, especially
including right now.
Yes.
Right.
So I really think that there's some coaches that just get stuck in their way, and they just have convinced themselves that this is the process and that process will get there eventually. It's going to get there. And there's other coaches that say, hey, we need to change some things. And it could be structurally a lot of different things. I'm not saying offensive play calling right now. I'm saying, why are you not getting up for away games this year? What's the issue there?
Right.
Strength and conditioning we talked about yesterday with the inconsistency there. What do you do this offseason to finish that out? What is your philosophy overall about playing offense, playing defense, moving forward? Because the reason that those philosophies mean so much is because we know that coaching turnover happens. Like Brian, we've talked about it, right? There's a chance that maybe Al Golden's gone after this year because he's done such a dang good job. It's like, is your philosophy intact? And I think it will be with Marcus Freeman as the head coach, but is your philosophy intact that you can just bring in another great defense coordinator and it just becomes a seamless transition? Because that's what the great coaches have created. That because if you are the head coach of a great program that has a great philosophy and you're in a great stretch, that when you lose coaches, you're going to, for one, and for two, it needs to be seamless because the foundation has been built on your program. And I think there's some foundational things that Notre Dame needs to figure out this offseason right now. Need to.
And it's easy, Ryan, to say, fire this guy, fire that guy, change your offensive scheme. And those things may be true. They may be needed at some point in time. Every coach has had to fire somebody before. Urban Meyer, had to fire somebody. I still remember they went 24-2 his first 2 years, and he basically de facto fired Everett Withers. He left for the head coaching job at James Madison back when James Madison was an FCS school. You don't leave the D coordinator job at Ohio State to go be the head coach at an FCS school. I don't care how good that FCS school is, because you have a job still. Right. I mean, we have seen him do that. We saw Ohio State go to the college football playoff in 2016, get smacked by Clemson. He could have said, hey, look, we'll be better next year. We've got some talent coming in, blah, blah, blah. No, he didn't. He said, we got to make a change offensively. And he did. Ryan Day has even done that. For all my criticism of Ryan Day as a head football coach, he looked at this and said, we have to be able to make stops. We have to be able to go out and turn this elite 5-star talent that we're accruing on defense, and it's got to turn into something. And
Ohio State's a great example. They're a great example because they are winning games this year in completely different fashion than what we're typically used to seeing Ohio State win.
For it. Right. Yep. They're getting banged for it by the media and other Ohio State fans, but you know what? They're still winning games. And we'll find out if it's good enough to kind of win it all. We'll see. Right. But every coach has to go through this. Every coach has to make changes. Sometimes they're the one that needs to change. And you can't be arrogant to the point of unwilling to look in the mirror and say, this is on me. And that was always Brian Kelly's biggest mistake. After 2015, Brian Kelly was absolutely unwilling to look in the mirror and say, this Van Gorder thing, it just was wrong. It was a mistake. He was just not around enough to know that Paul Longo was having the issues that he was having with the strength program. I knew about stuff that Brian Kelly didn't know about, which is just kind of disgusting. And what did Brian Kelly say? Hey, we just got to coach a little better and play a little harder, because we were this many plays away from being undefeated, which we can talk about this year. And the article that I'm going to write is going to talk about the need to finish, and it's going to sound like a lot of spin of, if they'd have done this team is really good, but it's really not spin, because clearly there's a flaw there that's keeping you from finishing that you need to figure out and address, and it goes deeper than just play calling. Is play calling part of it? Yes. Right. But my whole thing, the reason I keep pushing back on the play calling thing is because that is a byproduct of other things. And I have always held that view. This has nothing to do with Jared Parker, Tommy Rees, or Al Golden, or anybody. I don't know that I would say that Al Golden has done anything differently this year to show, wow, what a ingenious play caller he is compared to last year. If anything, he scaled back a little bit. But it's more about, I need to let my kid, so there was a bit of a philosophical change there. He didn't change the philosophy or the structure of what he believes in defensively, but he went about the way that they prepare differently. And the result has been a much better football team, a much better defensive football team.
Yep.
And so those are the things that you look at and say, look, it's easy for us to take the lazy, it's play calling. And again, we're not defending the play calling. That will get addressed in the offseason. But the reality is, Ryan, there are foundational issues that go way beyond. If you go fire Jared Parker tomorrow, and there's already reports out that I'm told are absolutely false about him getting fired and all this other kind of stuff, and whatever the case may be, and Like that doesn't do anything. That doesn't fix
Right.
anything. That just makes him the scapegoat, because
Yep.
there are much bigger issues here than Jared Parker's game planning or play calling.
Right.
And so those things have to get fixed first. Then you decide, is Jared Parker the guy or not? And Coach
Right.
Freeman may decide that he isn't. That's not my decision. That's Coach Freeman's. But if
Yep.
he just makes a change, like, and just promotes Gino Gaduli to OC next year, or goes out and hires somebody else that he's known that he worked with somewhere else that is going to run a similar approach than what they've had, then guess what? Nothing's going to change, because nothing really changed from last year to this year from a result standpoint. And there's people at Notre Dame fans that believe this team is worse than they were last year offensively. They're not. There's literally zero metric other than what third down offense that makes us think that this team is worse than they were last year. But the perception is different, because this year you had Sam Hartman, you had,
Yep.
there were things you thought you'd have that would make it better. And the point being, this goes much deeper than a Jared Parker, Joe Rudolph, Chancey Stuckey problem. Now,
Agreed.
could they be parts of the issue? Sure. I'm not there every day, but I'm just telling you, when I watch this team play and I see this just up and down, when I see Jared Parker throwing bombs against USC and Pitt and Central Michigan and NC State, and then I see them just being super, super conservative against Ohio State and Duke and Louisville, and not Louisville as much, but Clemson, you got to say to yourself, what is going on here? Right? Like, what is in the mindset that makes you go into games like this and say, we're afraid to let her rip?
Right.
And those things have to be addressed before you look at who you're going to get in the portal, what coaching changes you're going to make, what players you're going to bench, whatever the case may be. If those things don't get fixed, then all you're doing is putting Steve Angeli into the game and having him have to carry the team with the same problems that Sam Hartman had to deal with. And I just don't think that fixes anything. And that's all phases, Ryan. I mean, all phases played a role in Notre Dame losing to Clemson. Offense and special teams played an even bigger role, but defense had their moments as well. Same against Louisville, same against Duke, same against Ohio State. And so as a team, Marcus Freeman has to look in the mirror and say, okay, what went wrong? And this is okay. This doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person and I'm a sucky coach and I'm in over my head and all this other nonsense that we hear about things. It's like, look, I thought this was going to work. This was part of the evolution process of a young coach. It didn't work. How do I got to fix it? And then fix it. And then the other stuff will come. And that's going to be the big key. And that's true in every phase of the game for Notre Dame, every aspect of the program.
Well, and I know we're going to get into offensively what we want to see as far as down the stretch here, some adjustments that need to be made, some things that we are just very hopeful for seeing that I think would show that there is growth that can happen. At least I think the biggest thing that I want to see out of this bye week going down the stretch here is I think that there's a realization that needs to happen with this coaching staff, with Coach Freeman and the rest of like, hey, something's broken right now. Something's not working. We need to fix it, right? And I just need to see there's just some things that I think are going to showcase that is something that they are aware of, that is something that they need to get done. They are aware of the issues at hand, because some people are blind to the issues, right? But then other great coaches, as we've talked about, they see it and they understand it, and there's things that need to be implemented to help change it and get it back on course. So yeah, we want to start out with everything's on the table right now, folks, as far as evaluating. That's from players, coaches, offensive, defensive philosophies, the everyday, just how you utilize things, right? Whether it's the strength staff, whether it's the travel plans, whether it's the preparation for games, everything needs to be on the table when you're 7-3 and you did not meet your expectations and you're not where you need to be. It all needs to be evaluated. So that was kind of our bigger conversation. Evaluation needs to happen, Brian, but we're going to talk mostly here about the offensive side of football. We'll talk about defense later in the week, guys, because like there are things that need to be fixed also on the defensive side of the football. We're just not going to skate over this. Like you talk about the rush defense, especially, is something yesterday where it needs to get better.
Third down, yeah.
But offensively is where the most warts on this football team exist. It's where we have the most question marks moving forward. So there's several things we want to hit on here. First thing, Brian, that we wanted to talk a little bit about is, can they change, right? Can you adjust? What is your can you change your mindset to how offensively you are structuring things from a philosophical approach? And there's a lot of things that kind of are interwoven here But I think this comes back to our initial conversation of coaching staff, offensive coaching staff now, talking directly, they need to be able to evaluate and be like, hey, this isn't working. And when you know something's working, can you now change your mindsets? Can you reevaluate yourself and change what is not working and make it into something that is functionally possible for your offensive team? So right now, can they adjust down the stretch? These last 2 regular season games into the bowl game, can this offensive coaching staff adjust and figure out what they want to be?
And it's not even about play calling for me, Ryan. It's not. It's about a mindset. I mean, and part of my thing, Ryan, is I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, and you know where I'm going with this one, but like, I mean, they could call aggressive plays these next 2 games, and my response is going to be, so you did that against Central Michigan. You did that against Tennessee State. You did that against Pitt. You did that against USC. Like, I don't care. These are bad football teams. It's
if they come out just throwing bombs against Wake Forest, that didn't tell me anything, right? Because we've seen that. That did not tell me anything.
Yeah. Yep. Stanford is the worst defense they're going to play all year, and I would even argue you could make a case they're worse than Tennessee State defensively. Because if you look at Tennessee State's defense this year, they've been really salty at the FCS level. They're 6-3 this year.
They've shown a lot of improvements based upon 2022 to 2023, and most of it, to your point, Terrell Allen has been a dude for them this year. I think he leads the FCS in sacks. He's like 14.5 sacks this year, which is wild.
You talked about him coming into the season, Ryan, how good of a player he was. And their secondaries, we said at the time, has better talent at corner than some teams that they're going to face, and Stanford would be one of them, in my opinion, right? And so that doesn't really impact me. If the offense comes out the next 2 games and they score 40-plus points a game, okay, I don't care. They've already done that how many times? 6 times this year, right? 6 out of their 10 games, they've scored at least 42 points, 41 points, I should say, right? You had the first 4 games of the year. You had USC, you had Pitt last week, right? They could set an all-time school scoring record with what they do in the next couple games. And that's not really, I mean, that's good. And I think what that should get us to do is to say, hey, guys and gals, this offense isn't as bad as we think it is. Like, that's the thing we have to understand is this offense has done some really good things this year. They've had a few bad games. And I would not put Ohio State in there. Ohio State, I'd say they had 5 bad plays. They moved the ball up and down the field on Ohio State. They still have the best yards per play average against Ohio State, and it wasn't until Rutgers got outgained by like 10 that they had somebody had more yards. And that's not something to brag about because you still lost, and that's all that matters. But the point is, that wasn't a bad performance. You had to finish, and Louisville was a bad performance. Duke was a bad performance. The second half was a bad performance. Duke, Clemson was a bad performance from the offense. So I don't care that you go out and beat up a bad team. I've been doing that all year. It's more to me, Ryan, about how they go about their business. I watched this team on offense, and I had somebody reach out to me the other day, and they're like, man, there's just like no leadership on this offense. And the point he was making was, and you and I talked about this, you mentioned this the other day, there's no Kyron Williams. I mean, Aldrich Estime is a phenomenal running back, but he doesn't have that same get in your face and kind of thing that Kyron Williams had, or that Quentin Nelson had, and Joe Alt's not that way, and none of the tight ends or receivers that way. Sam Hartman's not that way.
I would say the biggest difference between Aldrich and a couple of those great leaders that we've seen, Brian, is Aldrich Estime is the type that he really, like, positivity really amplifies with him, right? Like when he's doing really well and you see it, and watch me, and you're going to get some energy off of that. What makes a great leader, though, the Kyron Williams of the world, the Quentin Nelsons, is when stuff isn't going well and you have to get in someone's face and be like, dude, like, let's go, man. Like, this is not acceptable here, right? This is not the standard. That was my favorite thing about Kyron, is that no matter if Kyron was doing really well or Kyron wasn't doing really well, or the offensive line was playing well or the offensive line wasn't playing well, or the team was winning or the team was losing, Kyron always brought that energy every single game, every single day. Even when he wasn't playing in the bowl game, even when he's just a spectator on the sideline last year, he's still out there, man. And you feel it. It radiates. You need those types of guys. And offensively, I don't know who that guy is when adversity hits.
That's it right there, Ryan. You nailed it. There's nothing wrong with Aldrich Estime being that kind of guy that he is. There's nothing wrong with Joe Alt being a lead by example guy.
Nope.
But every defense needs that guy, get in your face guy. And I mean, I think JD Bertrand is that way to a degree on defense, but not the same way, that maybe some other captains have been in the past, right? Maybe not the same way, not the same way Manti was in 2012. And I'm not talking about like he's not as good as Manti. I'm talking about just Manti was just kind of like when he talked, you shut up and listen, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
JD is a little bit more studious, right, with how he goes about it, and they just, I wonder about that. And you say, like, as a head coach, you got to look at that and say, what can we do to kind of bring out some of this, P and V? And I think part of it, Ryan, when I look at the offense, is a lot of the guys that have that mentality are the young guys.
Yep.
I mean, and you're just not going to get a Jeremiah Love, a Jaden Greathouse, a Rico Flores, guys like that to kind of come out and be that guy's freshman, nor should they. And so you've got to figure out, okay, what can we do these last few weeks to where we've got to be that? And that's where coaching has to come in. We've got to be that. And you can be it in I'm just going to rip your butts the next 2 weeks, or you can be that in hey guys, we're going to challenge each other kind of way. Right. And so here's how we're going to challenge each other. And we'll talk about some of those things, Ryan. But when you look at the offense, first thing is a mindset change, right? It's not, we need to call more plays on first down. That's true. But if you start calling more plays on first down, but your mindset doesn't change, ultimately it won't matter. I mean, if you have a better third down plan, it'll make a difference a little bit in these next couple games, but it's not going to have a big picture impact because you haven't changed your mindset. You haven't changed your attitude. You haven't changed who are we going to be? Who do we want to be? And that's kind of, Ryan, where what I'm going to learn about this offense is I expect them to make some schematic changes these next 2 games. And that's all fine and dandy. I would ask, why did it take 10 games to figure that out? That's a different conversation for a different day. But the biggest thing for me is I better see this group come out with a little P&V on Saturday next Saturday against Wake Forest. If I don't see that, then I don't care how many points they score. I don't care what their third down deal is. They're still going to struggle on the road next year against Texas A&M. They're still going to struggle when they get into the postseason and have to play in Ohio State next year. If they're, God willing, they're able to make the college football playoff, right? Those things are, the talent might mask some of that stuff, but it's still going to get exposed in the biggest moments.
Well, and I think that all goes into the motivation factor of this coaching staff, right? Can you? And again, we're talking about the offense, especially here, guys. Like, this is the offensive section. We'll talk about defense later in the week, more than likely. But Brian, like, I think that's look, if you don't have those guys on the offensive side of the football right now that are those fiery competitors, whether it's not competitors, that's the worst word. That's a bad word. That's a bad word choice. If you don't have those guys that are those high level leaders on your team that can really motivate through the negativity and through the downtrots of what a season can bring, then who do you need to be those guys for you? It's the coaches, right? Why do they get paid so much money and to have so much of the leadership role on their plate? They need to be able to motivate the players underneath of them. And let's be honest with ourselves right now, with what we saw against Clemson and what we've seen offensively stagnated through the second half of this year so far, is a lot of guys can check out. You can check out, and offensively compared to defensively, much younger group right now. Outside of Sam Hartman, you're dealing with a lot of freshmen playing at wide receiver. You're dealing with first-year starters inside at guard. You're dealing with a very young tight end room now that Mitchell Evans is hurt now, sophomores and freshmen. And you're dealing with that situation where, as a offensive coaching staff, you need to be able to motivate these kids down the stretch, because you can lose them, man. You can lose them. Right. You really can, especially a younger group that you have offensively outside of the quarterback position right now. So you need to be able to grab those reins, right, and really get this team excited. I mean, that's the thing that I want to see is, yes, I want to see them, to your point of, I want to see energy out of this group. I want to see them come out and pissed off, be ready to go against Wake Forest. But also, when stuff's going well, though, I also still want to see energy out of them, as far as I want to see happiness. I want to see excitement. I want to see joy out of playing this great game. Like, we always lose sight of the fact, and not us specifically, but just like as a collective, of this is a kid's game that we love dearly. And these kids have been playing it since they were little, super little. I mean, I started playing football when I was like 9 years old, right? Like, I love this game. Love it. Love every ounce of it. And I know a lot of kids Notre Dame's team, love it as well. And right now, that energy is being lost. And I think that love is being compromised from an outside perspective here. I think it's
Right.
being compromised. I want to see Jeremiah Love, Audric Estime, Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Thomas, if he's able to play down the stretch, who knows? The younger wide receivers, Rico Flores, Eli Raridan, some of the young offensive line or first inexperienced offensive linemen, I should say. I want to see that excitement and the vigor to play the game of football down the stretch. You need to be able to motivate this team, get the best out of them, but also get them excited to be a part of this unit, man, to be a part of this great university. I need to see that energy that has been lost. I need to see it down the stretch.
Here's my biggest issue, Ryan. We could sit here and talk all day about run game design, and I've had issues with that. Pass game design, and I've had issues with that. How they use their personnel, and I've had issues with that. How often they throw on first down, or the lack of throwing on first down, and all that's fine. You're always going to have those issues. But the issue that I've had is I'm kind of sick and tired of saying this team played with no urgency on offense. I'm sick of saying that. And it's not just the receivers. It's the offensive line. It's the quarterback. It's the tight ends at times. Holden Stace is a heck of a talent, but in the 2 games he's had to step in for Mitchell Evans, he's pretty much disappeared. What's the reason for that? And that's kind of my biggest issue. And when Audric is doing what Audric is doing on early against Clemson, did you see anybody else getting fired up because of how well he was playing? I didn't see anybody say, man, Audric is balling. Let's keep this thing going. I'd watch him make off a big run, and then the next play, your center or your guard get driven into the backfield 3 yards. Right. Your receivers don't come off the line with any urgency. And your quarterback doesn't play with any kind of urgency. Those are all mindset things that the play calling can be fixed, and they'll smash these next 2 teams, probably win a bowl game. It doesn't change anything. It just masks the problem, right? And again, that's been true at times on defense this year too, Ryan. I think they've just been able to mask it because of how experienced they are. Yep. That's what I think. And, but offensively, that to me is, I don't care. They could score 50 points in the next 2 games and play LSU in a bowl game and score 48 and win, and it won't matter to me if it's just about, well, we changed some plays, we were more aggressive, and Sam finished off on a high note. It won't matter at all to me if we're still seeing a team play with no fire, no urgency, no tempo, and we don't see any competition over these next 3 weeks. And I think that's something that you and I are craving for, Ryan, is you are playing 2 teams you're supposed to beat. Let's get Billy Schrouth out there at guard, see what he can do. Because right now your guards are not playing well. Let's get some of these receivers and say, look, Sam, we've got to get number 19 the football, man. We got to figure it out. We got to get number 5 the football, man. We got to figure it out, right?
Because if Jaden Greathouse gets involved in this offense, just cycling in on 19 for a second there, he is one of those guys that can bring some juice of excitement to the table. I mean, he brings that.
But it's hard to do that when you're a freshman who hasn't caught a ball in 5 games. It's like, hey, guys, we got to get going. It's like, shut up, man. When was the last time you haven't caught a ball since September? You know what I mean? That's what I would say if I was an older guy that had an incorrect attitude. That's what I'd say to him. No, I wouldn't like it. First 3 games of the year, that kid caught 8 passes for over 100 yards, 3 touchdowns. And since then, in a total of 6 games played, and he missed a game. In 6 games played, that kid has 4 catches for 53 yards in 6 games. 6 games played, 7 total for the team. That's crazy. A coaching problem, every bit as much as it's a player problem. Number 5, you got to get him the football. I don't care about what he dropped 4 weeks ago. See what he's got. And if he doesn't, and here's the thing, and here's why I say that, Ryan. If they force the ball to Tobias like they should have back in September, and he doesn't step up, then he's not that guy, right? Yeah. This is the reason that you need to force the issue with a guy like him. And same with Holden Stace. We need to push this kid. Same with Jaden Greathouse. We got to say, hey, Jaden, man, we need you. I know that you're a freshman and all this, and you're dealing with a hamstring, but man, I need you to go out and ball. And if Tobias doesn't step up and he doesn't make catches and he doesn't give effort, which people constantly say about him, which kind of blows my mind. I feel like if you're actually at a game outside of the Duke game, he definitely didn't play hard against Duke. He's played really well, Ryan. You watch the All-22, how often he's getting open the last 3-4 games. but he's got to get the ball. And then if you throw it to him and you're Sam Hartman, he doesn't catch it, then tell the coach, get him out. I can't trust that guy. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Yeah. But you'll know he's not it. And you say, okay, well, let's figure out who that guy's going to be. Let's get Jaden Greathouse over there. What's our plan going to be for Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert or Logan Saldate to get those guys going? And then and I want to see that. I want to see if Billy Strouth is that guy or not. I don't want to have to wait till Texas A&M and then it's, well, we can't, because here's what I'm sick of. Well, we can't really start him now. We have to go with Billy and Rocco now because, they're experienced and he just didn't play. And sure. that's the stuff I'm tired of. It's like, well, he's been in the system longer. I don't care about that. I'm trying to win championship. Yeah. I don't care about dues. You know who certain guys are. So let's see what those other kids have. And then here's the thing too, Ryan, is if they don't have it, like right now, my whole stance is I do not want to see Notre Dame go in the portal at wide receiver. Do not. But here's the deal. If you push these kids the next couple weeks and you challenge them and they step up and they don't answer the bell, now and now your stance on the portal may change. I'm challenging Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie. Maybe it's not on game day at first, but how you go about your business this next 3 weeks and into bowl prep is going to tell me a lot about who you are. And right now I'm saying go to the portal, but I mean, I'm just kind of going for depth and maybe a guy that can challenge, but I'm more concerned about building up the younger players. But if they don't answer the bell this next month, then now my strategy's got to change. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing, Ryan, is like if I'm say, hey, Jeremiah, we're going to get you going. And he goes out there and drops 3 passes and runs a bunch of wrong routes. And like he's not ready yet, right? He's not ready yet. Same with Jadarian, whether it's him, he's not ready yet. Try to do something with Cooper Flanagan, see what he can do. Well, he didn't step up. He dropped a couple balls. He's not ready. Or he may step up and be like, this guy's a dude. We just needed to give him the rock. I think of, like I said, Chris Olave from, 2019, 2018, something like that. Chris Olave caught like 2 to 3 passes or something like that his freshman year. Didn't hardly play at all, and then goes out and just
probably 2018.
Yeah. And it just goes out and actually I'm going to pull it up right now. Catches 4 balls for 60 yards, and then 5 balls for 70 yards going into the big game against Michigan. And then he comes out against Michigan, catches 2 balls for 48 yards, both go for touchdowns and a win. Gets into the Big Ten title game, catches 5 balls for 79 yards and a touchdown, against what was a pretty good Northwestern secondary. It wasn't as good as the 2020 secondary, but it was still pretty good.
It was good.
And so you're like, hey, this kid finally got a shot. We threw him the ball and he stepped up and made plays. He's got a little something to him. Or he doesn't. And then And that's the whole thing is challenge these kids. And here's the other thing too. It's not just about them stepping up. What I want to see how Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan react to maybe losing a little bit of playing time. How do they respond to it? Do they step up and handle it the right way? Do some of the older receivers kind of step up? Do they not? If Cooper goes out there or Eli Rarian goes out there and balls out, how does Holden respond to that? Does he bounce back and say, okay, I better step up and do this? So learning about your football team, Ryan, and that's part of the evaluation process that has to happen. And it can't do that with the status quo. And that's my biggest fear, is that we're going to see the status quo these next 2 games, and it's going to be the same guys doing the same stuff, and they're just going to execute a little bit better against 2 bad football teams. Although Wake has a little bit of a salty defense this year.
They have some good players. Jasheen Davis at defensive end. They got Kalen Carson at corner. They got Mustafa at safety. So they got some NFL kids on the defense. They do.
Right, but they're not a very good football team. No. So because they're scoring 22 points a game, they remind me a lot of Pitt. Honestly, as far as salty defense, not super talented, but they got some kids. And then Notre Dame went out and was aggressive against Pitt and lit them up. Right, that's what should happen. Same thing in Stanford. But if it's just the same guys and the same stuff over and over again, it's like, what did we really? So where's the accountability? You can just keep going out there and doing this week after week against teams with a pulse, but we're going to keep throwing you out there against teams that suck and praise you because how good you looked in the moments that don't matter. Because you're defined at Notre Dame by how you do in the big moments, right? Like Brady Quinn will always be remembered at Notre Dame, not just because of the numbers, but because of his big moments, against USC, leading them down on that last drive. They ended up not winning the game, but we'll always remember the plays Brady made down the stretch. We'll always remember, Brady going out there against Penn State and ripping them up. We'll always remember the fourth quarter against UCLA where Brady made those money game-winning plays. And you've got winners. Who are those guys going to be? Mo Stovall seemed to be always at his best when it was a big moment. Jeff Samardzija seemed to always be at his best in the big moments. I didn't care about, the numbers are fine, but who were you in the biggest moments? And right now, the Notre Dame offense is a team that when they play in the biggest games, I mean, with all due respect, Ryan, they shrink. They shrink in the moment. And there's no other – and it's not just the players. It starts at the top. And that's where the play calling becomes an issue because the play calling is symbolic of the mentality going in where I don't have faith in us. So we're going to just, ground and pound and limit possessions and hope that, our defense doesn't give up any points. When you coach scared, your kids are going to play scared. And maybe they're coaching scared because the kids play scared. I don't know what it is, but that's an issue, Ryan. And those are the things I need to see. Forget all the play calling stuff and all that. It's more about that mindset. And that's the thing. And that's where I want to see competition. And I know for you, that's going to be a big thing too. These next couple of games is we better see Love and Price and Greathouse and all those kind of guys.
Well, we talked about it, Brian, and I know people in the chat were asking this at some point in the podcast of like, all right, well, structurally, if they are a little bit more aggressive and they're able to kind of finish more drives, if that's not an indicator of Notre Dame changing something, right, or having a growth mindset, what will? And when we were kind of texting about it earlier, for me, number one was I want to see more competition on this offense right now. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing offensively consistently is not working. It's not sustainable for playing the best teams on your schedule. It's not working right now. So there needs to be some type of change. And for me, it always starts from, hey, if you have some players that you feel like are not situationally making a difference or not holding their end of the bargain or whatever, let's get some competition because I think there's two sides to it. Competition opens up. The players that are at the top, they either need to light a fire under their butt, right? Or they sink to the competition and they shrivel. Or, hey, maybe giving a Jeremiah Love more opportunities will let him flourish. And that unlocks something in your offense that you structurally did not have enough of in this stretch. Maybe Jaden Greathouse gets back to the swagger that we saw early in the season now that he's fully back from the hamstring issue. Maybe Cooper Flanagan takes off. Maybe Eli Raritan takes off with more snaps and more opportunities. Maybe Billy Schrauth down the stretch of the last 3 games, even if he's not the full-time starter, you start to build now and say, okay, that's a guy that we can build with in the future, going into next season. I want to see, and this would be the biggest indicator for me of that there has been a self-realization by this staff that like, hey, offensively, we're not good right now, consistently enough. We're not. So what are we going to do to change things? We have talent. Let's make the talent make each other better. Iron sharpens iron. I want to see some of these young cats get more opportunities. I want to hear about competition. When Marcus Freeman talks about the press conferences over the next 2 weeks, I want to hear about what they are doing as an offense to give guys more opportunities to push others or to get an expanded role in this offense. I want to see it. And that could be, again, offensively from a quarterback position. Maybe Steve Angeli gets an opportunity at times. Maybe Kenny Minchey gets an opportunity at times. Running back, we see more of Jeremiah Love. We see more of Jadarian Price. We see more of at the wide receiver position, Jaden Greathouse being used in a better way. We see maybe Braylon James get some more snaps. We see Cooper Flanagan get some more snaps. We see Eli Raritan get opportunities in the passing game finally. Billy Schrauth gets an opportunity. Maybe Charles Jagasaw gets an opportunity down the stretch. I don't know. I just want to see competition. What would be the biggest indicator that Notre Dame offensively understands there's an issue? Competition. Opening things up and letting these kids show what they can do. I have no idea what Billy Schrauth can consistently bring to the table right now because I haven't seen it. I have no idea what Jeremiah Love consistently can bring to the table because I haven't seen it on a week-to-week basis. Same thing with Cooper Flanagan. Same thing with Eli Raritan. If you allow this team to play and to compete with one another every single day and you evaluate that for what it is, no more set in your ways of these are our two guards, that's who's going to play, that's it. Audric Estime is the bell cow. No, open it up. And this is no slight against Audric, because I think Audric's been very good this year. And I actually think Audric's going to be probably a top 100 pick in April if he declares for the 2024 NFL draft. But the point of the matter is that there is talent that is not being used well enough or at all on this offense right now for an offensive unit that has struggled far too often this year. Competition will show me that there's been a little bit of a self-realization.
What is your faith that happens, Ryan? Because right now, honestly, I don't have a lot.
Yeah. I think it varies by position for me, right? It varies by position. Like I'm pretty confident that Dylan McCullough will get some running backs opportunities if they're ready for it, Like if Dylan McCullough thinks that Jeremiah Love's ready for more touches, I actually have faith that he's going to give that room a little bit more of an opportunity, right? But there's other positions that I have no faith that that's going to happen. I mean, offensive line wise, I don't know Joe Rudolph well enough at this point to know if that's a decision that he will make down the stretch. I don't know, right? So I am hopeful, Brian, as I always am, but I'm just merely a spectator of I'm sitting back and I'm going to evaluate, right? Because we talked about evaluating everyone from coaches to players and everything in between. If I'm Marcus Freeman, I'm also seeing who of my assistant coaches are letting guys compete, who are giving them the opportunities. Because ultimately, Marcus Freeman has a say in rotations and such, but who decides which running back gets the bulk of the carries? Dylan McCullough. He's the position coach. He's the one that decides that stuff. Offensive coordinator. They decide that stuff together.
I would like to see Dylan McCullough, and maybe he has, but if I'm Dylan McCullough, and I'm going to say this differently, because I don't know what Dylan McCullough has or has not done all season. I'm just going to tell you what I would do if I was him right now. I'm going in the office, and I would have done this Monday, and I'm pounding on the table saying, I'm tired of us not being able to make plays. I got a group of kids that can make plays. We got to figure out more ways to use them. Simple as that. I don't want to hear any excuses about how we can't make big plays in the pass game. Why did we not do more to get Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price in space against Jeremiah Trotter, whose biggest weakness is what? Pass defense. Well, Notre Dame barely threatened him in that regard, and so they just allowed him to play downhill all game. And guess what? He dominated because that's his game. And so that's what I'm doing at that point. I'm going to say, hey, look, I don't want to hear this. Oh, we're missing Jaden Thomas. We're missing Dion. We're young. We're blah, blah. Okay, that's the reality of it. But you know what? I got a loaded running back room that in the last 3 games has produced how many big plays? Kick return, receiving, running. How about we do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, that's what I would like to see, because that's where you feel like, okay, that's where I would have the most faith that guys are going to come in and step up is that group, because they've been doing it all year and they play with confidence, and and maybe that can be the thing that wakes the receivers up. Hey guys, I'm more than comfortable just going 12 personnel or 22 personnel or 21 personnel and just getting Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price the football. Right now, here's the thing, though, Ryan. That requires a mentality change from the offensive coaching staff.
Yes, it does.
And that's something that I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to see that right now, because I don't know that they're going to be allowed to do that right now. My biggest fear is that Marcus Freeman is going to look at these next 2 opponents. He's going to say this, like, guys, Wake Forest is averaging 22 points a game. Like, they are not a good football team. We are not going to do things to try to give them chances to force turnovers and make some plays and do those type of things and allow them to get in the game. We're not going to do that. No. So we're going to come out, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we're going to let our defense win this football game. That can't happen. And then if they do that, who gets blamed for it? Jared Parker, Joe Rudolph, Gino Guidugli, Chancey Stuckey, that kind of thing. Sure. Right? It's got to be a mindset of, hey, Jared, Gino, Chancey, Dylan, Joe, let's go. Right? Let's go. So I shouldn't say that I'm not hopeful or that I am hopeful, Ryan. It's more about I need to see it, right? We've talked about it, but I need
Yeah.
to see it. And that's my thing.
You're a bystander right now, right? You're watching and observing, because this is a situation where, again, I've never seen a Joe Rudolph led offensive line down the stretch for a Notre Dame team. Never seen it. Never seen it. I have no idea what it's going to look like. I've never seen Jared Parker down the stretch of a season as the offensive coordinator for the University of Notre Dame. Never seen it. Gino Guidugli, never seen it, right? There's offense coaching staff is one that I am still learning about, right? And learning does not mean that they're doomed, right? There's a lot of good coaches that learn and they continue to grow, right? There's a lot that do that. So I'm not here to pass judgment on this offensive coaching staff right now. I am here to say at this moment, I've been underwhelmed by this offensive philosophy and attack consistently. I've been very underwhelmed by it. But is that me saying I'm jumping ship and I'm saying all hope is lost? No, I'm not there. I'm not. Because again, we're still learning about this offensive coaching staff. Will it be good enough? Maybe. Will it be good enough? Maybe not. I mean, there's two realities that exist right now. But ultimately, what I do believe is that we will find out more about this team, this offensive coaching staff specifically, down the stretch of the season. We will. Because I think this bye week is placed in a spot coming off of a bad loss against Clemson, where there needs to be self-realization. There needs to be guys evaluating themselves and evaluating one another. That needs to happen this season. So I'm hopeful. I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful. And that's the only place I can be right now, because this offense is a mess. It's a mess.
It is.
And structurally, there's a lot of things I would love to see. But again, competition, getting these kids to play fiery, those are going to be the signals that, like, hey, guys are bought in and they're being pushed and they're hopefully coming to the occasion of playing well. And I mean, structurally, we could talk about like all the things I would love to see. I would love to see a little bit more of a sophisticated, creative passing attack. I would love to see a little bit more of, two backs, 21 personnel. I would love to see a little bit more of that. I would also love to
where
see
you move that back outside more. Don't just leave them in. I mean, you can do the split back stuff. That's great. There's things you can do, but there's also things you can do moving them outside, spreading the field out. Like put Jeremiah Love outside, Ryan, and 21 personnel, and you've got Holden Stace out there, and Rico Flores or Jaden Greathouse out there who are pretty good blockers and run RPOs. You know what I mean? So like, hey, if you guys want to crash inside and try to take Audric, I'm pulling that sucker and I'm getting it out to Jeremiah Love on the perimeter, Jadarian Price on the perimeter, right? Now, again, I've said this before, in that particular look, I think Jeremiah Love is the guy that would be better suited because he's the shiftiest of, not that Jadarian Price isn't shifty. I mean, he is, but Jeremiah has the most wiggle of all those guys, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, and the thing that gets me too, Ryan, is like, look, we can say whatever we want about, their injuries and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm like, guys, it was basically the same guys that played against Pitt.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I know Clemson's really good on defense, but are they that much better than Pitt that you had to completely abandon everything that you did the week before, from spreading the field and using RPOs and taking shots down the field? Literally, you had to abandon all of it. You were that afraid of Clemson that you did that. Like, I don't want to hear, well, it's injuries. Because if it was that, Ryan, it would have just been like, we'd be seeing this every game. Hey, guys, look, these are young kids, right? I mean, we got to be patient. Jaden Thomas has been out for 2 months, and Deion's been out for 2 months, and Holden's, Mitchell Evans has missed 2 games, and, they've got all these injuries, and Jadarian's coming back from an Achilles, so you can't really play him 30 snaps a game. I mean, we could make all the excuses in the world, but if those were true and that was that debilitating, then we would have kind of seen this week after week where, we wouldn't see them rip people up the way that they do.
Sure.
And that's the frustrating thing for me, is it just looks so different from one week to the next. And that goes back to the beginning, Ryan, as we wrap this up. That's a mindset change. All the stuff we just talked about of using Jeremiah Love and all that play calling, all that stuff is necessary. I want to see, you'd mentioned it to me in a text message, right? Be willing to be more aggressive in early downs. And it doesn't mean going empty and throwing 4 verts. It could also mean on first down, running a 13 personnel bootleg where you take a shot. You know what I mean? Where, maybe this time you boot to the field a little bit instead of always booting to the boundary when people are going to blitz an edge guy when you blitz into the boundary, right? And so, I mean, just those are all things that are manifestations of just an aggressiveness that we haven't seen. But I just want to,
Right.
but I just want to see this team do that, be aggressive, but then also just play with some fire. Because if they
Yes.
come out and rip them up and just rip up Wake, but it's just kind of like our dudes are better than your dudes, that doesn't move the needle for me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Again, I think we're talking about what is sustainable and what is not sustainable. Like, I think that them coming out against Wake Forest or Stanford and being more aggressive on first down, that'd be awesome to see. But ultimately, this offense's shortcomings have been against the great defenses they played on the schedule. So I just think that offensively, structurally, I don't think there's a ton that this team will show me the last two games to make me optimistic for that being the big difference in this offense. It's more about the things behind the scenes, the competition, the ability to play more players, the vigor and the excitement that you get out of these players each and every week, get them excited to play the game. Those internal things, I think, is what we need to see translate to a Saturday. Need to see that type of stuff. Because I think that's really going to demonstrate whether this offensive coaching staff has not the reins, but like has the excitement from their players that are playing under them every single day. Because in order for a player to play to their optimal level, they one need to be used correctly, but then two, they need to feel like there is commitment to them, there's confidence in them, and that there's excitement about them, and they will return that excitement as young players. 18 to 24-year-olds having that type of commitment and confidence from their coaching staff, I think that you will be surprised with how many guys rise to the occasion. I could be wrong, but I'm excited about it, Brian. I'm excited about it. So that's offense that we want to see kind of down the stretch, guys. A little bit of some offensive changes, but more philosophical shifts that I think need to kind of take place on the offensive side of the football. The defense, again, we'll talk about some of the things that we need to see from the defense, but we really needed to devote most of this time to talking about the offensive side of the football, because that has been the shortcomings in the biggest games this season, right? Ohio State,
Yeah.
Louisville, even Duke in a close loss in the second half. Like
Close win,
the
yeah.
shortcomings between
Right.
Clemson, like those shortcomings have been more on the offensive side of the football. So we wanted to devote that time, obviously, to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, Ryan, we'll see how it all kind of plays out. You've got to finish strong. You know, I know Jesse and Vince talked about this last night on IB Nation Sports Talk. You know, like, look, I personally think you've got to find that sweet spot between you got to do whatever you got to do to win the last 3 games, and then you got to have more competition, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at. And, you know, like special teams, with all due respect, I'm getting Marist and JD and Jack off all my special teams and let them be my guys on defense. And I'm giving, you know, Nolan and Drake Bowen and Jaden Osprey and those guys those reps.
Yeah, why have you been recruiting the linebacker position so well, and you're not just kind of emptying the holster on special teams with those guys, right? Like, yeah, you're 100% correct there, 100%.
Right. So, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of Donovan Heinisch and Jason Onye these last couple games. You know, if they earn it, you know, challenge them in the week of practice and earn it. You know, I would like to see a little bit more Christian Gray, because I'll be honest, these last 2 games, I have this really, like, I just don't want to see happen to Cam Hart what happened to him last year.
Sure.
You know, that doesn't mean don't play him, shut him down. But what I'm saying is, you know, maybe you mix in those younger guys a little bit more, keep his legs fresh, keep his shoulders, take a little bit of wear and tear off the pounding of his shoulders, because his film right now is phenomenal. And he could easily go shut down these next 2 teams, right? And then, you know, I'd play him more against Wake, or at least against Stanford, at least early, you know, but those are the things that I want to see. And I don't know if we will, but that's what I want to see.
I want to be surprised. I want to be surprised these last couple games of like, oh man, they have a little bit more oomph to what they're doing each day offensively and defensively. So I want to be surprised, man. I want to be surprised.
So Ryan, are you gonna do a mailbag here next?
Yeah, I'll do a mini one real quick. Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'm gonna step out, and what I'll do is I'll go through and star some of the mailbags that I haven't seen. So my goal was to make it through the first hour. I'm surprised I made it through the first hour, but you know, Ryan, sick as I am, what's the rule, man? Rule number 76: no excuses, play like a champion. So I was not missing this show today. We had to, but that's why we had to move it back to 2, because if it was at 1 o'clock, I would have not been able to make the show today. So
you made it, man. You made it.
I did.
Yep. You are a champion, sir. So mailbag questions, start getting them in. That will do this first portion of the show. What does a strong 2023 finish look like for Notre Dame? We're going to get into a little bit of a mini mailbag next, so make sure to throw those questions in the chat if you haven't already. MB before the question to make it easily distinguished as far as what is a mailbag question and what is just you guys talking ball in the chat. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell on YouTube so you know when we're going live each and every day. Also, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sign up there. Just put a little bit of a recruiting intel on the message board before we got on here. Of course, Brian, especially in a bye week, I'm sure we'll be getting some team intel that we'll be able to share for you guys as well. So make sure to go sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Thank you for joining this section of the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, folks, I think I had a couple super chats here. I did. All right. So if you have any questions, any super chats you want to throw in there, please feel free. I will be here for a little bit of a mini mailbag for you all. Want to start us out as we always go to super chats first. This one is from Michael S. Says, in the world of defensive coordinator to head coach, do you see Marcus Freeman on track to being Dan Lanning or Dave Aranda? Interesting question. I think that this offseason is going to determine, or the next few games into the offseason is going to determine just how confident I am with where Marcus Freeman's heading, Michael, because for me, there's been a lot of positives, right? As far as I do feel like for the most part, they've been more competitive in the bigger games. Now they need to get over the hump more consistently. And I think that there's been a lot more accountability from a staff as far as when something doesn't work. I do think that Marcus Freeman, for the most part, takes that criticism and takes his obligation as the head coach to say, that's on me. That's on me. We need to move forward and we need to be better. And I think that recruiting efforts have definitely taken a nice step forward. I think that talent acquisition in general is going to be very good for Notre Dame for the foreseeable future, obviously moving forward. So I think there's a lot of positives in what Marcus Freeman has done for the University of Notre Dame. There is going to be, though, a little bit of a make it or break it soon here, as far as I think there's an adoption that needs to happen on the offense and an adaption on the offensive side of the football. As far as Notre Dame defensively, I feel great under Marcus Freeman. No matter who the defensive coordinator is moving forward, whether it's Al Golden into the foreseeable future, whether it's someone else, if Al Golden moves to the NFL at some point, whatever, I think that defensively this team is going to be very good for the most part. Offensively, there is an evolution that needs to happen, in my opinion, at the University of Notre Dame. And that could be with the current staff, that could be with a different staff. I don't know what the future holds. All I know is that it needs to be better and it needs to be more than anything more consistent against every football team, because you're going to win some of those big games, even if your offense isn't playing that well. I mean, we've seen it already, but are you going to win enough? Are you going to win the games when it matters most? That's my question. It makes it a lot more difficult when your offense is stagnant too often. So I think that adaptation needs to happen, obviously, especially into this offseason. Year 3, I think we're going to get a great glimpse of how good it can be for the University of Notre Dame, or maybe if it's a little bit stagnated, maybe if it's just not the right time for Marcus Freeman. I mean, that stuff is all to be determined moving into the future. So as far as the trajectory, I also think that this is an imperfect comparison between two coaches, because Dan Lanning went to a very good situation at the University of Oregon. As far as, look, Mario Cristobal did not leave that cupboard empty. There was a lot of talent at Oregon before Dan Lanning got there. Now he got there, and I feel like he's utilized it well. I think they're trending in a great direction. I do think they're a very good and a pretty complete football team. And I think they can compete down the stretch, not only in the pack, but if they make somehow a playoff run down the stretch, I think that they would be a very tough out for a lot of different teams. So I think that it's heading in the right direction, but I'm not going to sit here and act like Dan Lanning was put into a bad situation at Oregon, a school that is very supportive of the athletic department, of football especially, that has money to spend, that gave him a good roster to work with. I think that he has been in a pretty good situation. Dave Aranda, I don't think that he was in a good situation. He took over a bad Baylor team. They struck gold in the COVID year with a little bit of an older roster. And the last couple years now, it has been a struggle because I don't know if he'll ever be able to recruit at a high enough level at Baylor where it's going to be a consistent thing on a year in and year out basis. I think if Dave Aranda's there long term, I think it's going to be a couple average years, another down year, and then a really good year, because I do think he's a really good defensive coach, and I think he knows the game, obviously, and I think that he is a motivator of men. So I think that he could still be a good, successful coach, but I just think that Baylor and Oregon are completely different situations, like completely different. I just don't think that's a fair comparison 1-to-1. But to the overall question, what I think you're asking, do I think Marcus Freeman can be really successful at Notre Dame? Yeah, I do. I think that he brings a lot outside of just the charisma as a person he is, the personality, recruiting. I think that he's done some good things on the field. I think he's done some good things with the program in general, but it needs to take a next step. It can't just be stagnated, right? You need to show that there's growth. Now, to the positives that you've been able to relay with the program, they just need to take the next step. And I think they get there, but it's a lot is going to be determined over the next 12 months, over the next calendar year. We're going to see a lot as far as what the future for Notre Dame football can hold, in my opinion. Great question, though, Michael. And thank you so much for the super chat, if I didn't say that already. We had another super chat from Jim DeMatteis. Thank you so much, Jim. It said, have the coaches lost the team? No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. I don't think that there's a lack of confidence in Freeman as a leader of men, as a coach, and I mean, I think that he is going to. I believe that he is going to always attract a lot of talent into the program, and I think that the players admire him and they will play for him. So I don't think that there's a lack of trust in the coaches. So I definitely don't think they've lost the team. I think that there are simply fundamental flaws. I don't think offensively, the offensive skill position, for instance, I don't think they've given up on this team, right? And that's why they haven't been good in certain games and they've been bad in certain games. I don't agree with that. I don't. I think that this is a team that offensively needs to adapt and they need to evolve and they need to develop better in certain situations. They need to. Again, whether that is a coaching change eventually, whether that is a strength and conditioning issue, whether that is an offensive play calling issue, whatever the biggest culprit is, there's a change that needs to happen offensively. But if you're asking me, did they play against Clemson because they don't believe in Coach Freeman and that he lost the team? I don't agree with that even slightly. I don't. I have not heard from anyone, including Brian and his sources, obviously closer to the team. I haven't heard anything from past recruits, parents, current recruits that don't believe in Marcus Freeman as the head coach at the University of Notre Dame. So I don't believe that he's lost the team. I think the only way he could lose the team is if there's stagnation, though, from here on out. If this happens again next year where you're just kind of in question of like, hey, when's the next step going to happen? I think that's when you lose a football team. I don't think he's lost a football team this year. I just think that they need to adapt and they need to evolve a little bit. But again, Jim, great question. And thank you so much for the super chat. It's very much appreciated. We're going to go to Relly Q. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate you. Am I wrong to put a heap of blame on Jack Swarbrick for the offense? Marcus Freeman went for an offensive coordinator, like his defensive coordinator, that was a seasoned, proven vet at his job. I mean, no disrespect to Jared Parker while he's learning. I honestly don't take this question as disrespect to Jared Parker. I don't. I think that this is a situation, and it's a very understandable question, and it's a very fair question. It really is, because I believe that Marcus Freeman had a vision for his team, and there was definitely, obviously, a hierarchy of choices at the offensive coordinator position, and Andy Ludwig was his guy. There's no question that Andy Ludwig was the guy that Marcus Freeman wanted as his offensive coordinator. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was the guy he wanted. And obviously, the saga ensued, and Andy Ludwig did not become the offensive coordinator at the University of Notre Dame, and we all know why and the reasons, and that has been stressed about, right? So, but I think it's a very layered question, really, Hugh, and I think it's a great question because, so does part of me say that the lack of support from the administration, especially in the offensive coordinator hire, did that set the offense back a little bit? I think that's fair. Yeah, I think it's fair. Because I think there's an underlying of like Coach Freeman loves Jared Parker, and Brian already said it that he believes, based upon his intel and his conversation, that Jared Parker would probably have been the future offensive coordinator at Notre Dame at some point. But it may have just been too early. It's possible, right? That's a reality that we need to at least talk about, that maybe it was just a little bit early for Jared Parker to be the offensive coordinator at the University of Notre Dame. Maybe he needed a little bit more seasoning, a little bit more time to percolate, like that type of thing. But ultimately, I think that lack of support can set you back a little bit. I'm not ready to place all the blame on Jeff Swarbrick. I mean, I've been very vocal about that. If you guys don't remember my little bit of a rant when the Andy Ludwig situation happened, I advise you to go listen to it, and you would know that I was very much against the lack of support that the administration has given to him consistently. But I think that great coaches adapt, right? And so you ended up, after the Andy Ludwig situation happened, you decided that, okay, this is Jared Parker time. And you decided that I'm not going to continue a national search. I'm not going to go out for the next guy. I believe in the guy that I have here. So Marcus Freeman believes in him. So from here on forward, you need to make that work. You need to make that situation happen and for it to be successful. That's the next step, obviously, right? So part blame, sure. Did it set it back? Yes. But is someone in place at offensive coordinator that was pushed upon Marcus Freeman or someone that he doesn't believe in? No, he believes in Jared Parker. So they need to be able to make this happen and make it successful moving forward, or a change needs to happen. Those are the two pathways that can go from here. But I don't place the full blame on Jack Swarbrick. No, I don't place the full. But is there a little bit of setting the offense back a little bit as far as your initial vision? Yeah. You needed to reassess the situation after the Andy Ludwig situation happened. So it's a fair question. I'm just not ready. I'm just not willing to put full blame on him, but it's a very reasonable question and a very fair one, I would say. But thank you again for the super chat, Real Q. We had another super chat from Raymond Harton, says, do you think that going into the bye off an ugly loss will have more impact and changes than it did off the USC win? Yes, absolutely, Raymond. I do. I do. Look, how much the changes are and what the changes ultimately are is the question that's up in the air, right? I'm not in the mind of the Notre Dame coaches as far as what they see as the biggest issues and how they plan on fixing it. I have no idea what the next step will be necessarily, but I do think that there's definitely going to be a different vibe, because winning sometimes, and I talked about this actually after the Pittsburgh win, especially because you beat the you-know-what out of USC, then you beat the you-know-what out of Pittsburgh. But I think when you watch those football games, you still knew that their flaws offensively were still there. You knew it was still there. But big wins masked those issues a little bit. They masked them, at least from the national perspective, at least from the outside perspective. You look at the box score and say, wow, Notre Dame beat Pittsburgh 58-7, scored 58 points against them. It's a pretty solid defense. Wow, they're churning offensively. But then you watch the game and you're like, no, they forced 4 interceptions and put them in some short fields, and there were still some sloppy interceptions, and it wasn't consistent offensive football. So I think that hid a little bit of the feeling of, hey, changes need to happen. I think that happened especially in USC. USC offensively, they did what they needed to do, but it wasn't exotic. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't exciting offensive football, but you won the game. You won the game by 28 points. You scored 48 points in the end. So I think that hid the fact that, like, there still are some flaws that you need to work on. Coming off of a loss, I think it's obvious that stuff needs to change, right? There's nothing to mask the fact that the offense played poorly last game. There's nothing to mask it. So I am more hopeful, Raymond, than I was coming off the USC win that changes will happen. Some sort of changes. Will it be enough? Will it be the ones that I deem are the necessary changes that need to happen? I have no idea. But do I think there will be more than what there were after USC? Yes, I do. Because I think that ugly loss, I think a loss in general, will initiate a little bit more of like, hey guys, that sucked, right? Like that wasn't good. We need to figure that out. So I do think that structurally there will be difference. I think it will be different. And we'll see if I'm right or not, but I do think that there will be more potential changes than there were after the USC game. We had a question from Joe Alan, what's up, Joe? Says, not saying fire anyone, but what if Notre Dame hires someone like an advisor analyst to help with offensive problems? I think an analyst, hiring as many good analysts is, let me rephrase. I think hiring analysts that are, because I am a believer that there's too much voices in a room at some point, right? Like I don't want too much voices, especially like with quarterbacks. I just don't want too many voices in their head. But I do think that hiring experienced and good analysts can be a huge asset to a program. Really do. I mean, like Gary Patterson down in Texas right now. Do I think that Gary Patterson has helped that defense take their next step and be a lot better of a unit this year than in previous years? Yeah, absolutely. Right? Like 100% I do. Do I think that Chip Long has had some big help into the Louisville offense, dueling his mind with Jeff Brom and Brian Brom? Absolutely, I do. So I would definitely look into the analyst side of things, right? As far as hoping. I think that was maybe one flaw of Notre Dame this past offseason. When you were going to roll with an inexperienced offensive coordinator, maybe getting a experienced analyst in the room would have been a very good idea. Maybe it would have been a great idea. And I don't know who that guy would be necessarily. And I don't know if that guy was out there. So I'm not passing complete judgment there, but it probably would have been a good thing to have. So moving forward, would I explore those types of options? Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because I think that they could be a big boost in a situation, right? Whether that's even taking a good defense to great, whether it's taking a bad defense to solid or a bad offense to solid, I really think that it can be a big boost in a program, especially having a consistent and experienced voice in the room that someone trusts. I think that can help. So yeah, I would definitely look into that. I would definitely be open to that conversation. There's no doubt. We had another question rolling through some of these. Great questions, guys, by the way. The history expert, excuse me. I almost said teacher. I don't know why I said teacher. It's clearly expert. It's probably too late, but yeah, have y'all thought about doing another Thanksgiving show? Not only it was successful, the show itself was one of the best IB ever did. I believe this is the fundraiser that Brian did a couple years ago. Actually, I wasn't even a part of IB at the time, but I know that a lot of people had great reviews of that of the fundraiser that Brian had put out for IB. So I know Brian has talked about it, the history expert, as far as doing some things of similar fashion, but I don't have any updates for you all as far as when that will happen, if it will happen, like that type of thing. So I'll ask Brian and see what he has kind of cooking up. But I know he mentioned a couple weeks ago as far as like he was trying to plan a couple things of similar fashion. So I don't know if that's like a toy drive or, kind of into the Christmas season or like anything. I really don't know what he has planned, but I know that Brian is constantly trying to give back. So I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. So we'll see. Thank you for the question as always. Andrew Gilmore says, have you heard a satisfactory answer for the coaching staff as to why Notre Dame is playing so much worse on the road? I would argue that their opponents have been more physical in 3.5 out of 4 road. Andrew, I would slightly probably tweak the 3.5. I mean, I think that, like, I don't know. That's semantics though. Like, I'm not really actually ready to argue that. I mean, like, you could argue it was 3/4 of a game. You out physical NC State. You could argue that you out physical Duke for a half of a football game, the first half, and then you fizzled in the second. But that's semantics at this point. Your point stands though. Your point absolutely stands. Have I heard a excuse for or satisfactory answer, not an excuse for why that happens? Not really. I mean, I think that it's always just been about the process, right? And but honestly, I'm more worried about the action anyway, right? Like I'm way more worried about that. So I don't think there could have been any answer that would have made me feel better about the situation, because ultimately it's not working on the road consistently, especially this year. It's not working. So the next big game on the road, I think, will be an indicator of whether there was growth or at least there was thought process to some types of changes. But if you're asking me a media availability, if Marcus Freeman has said anything that has made me feel like understand deeply why it's been such a diverse situation on the road compared to at home, no, I haven't really heard anything. So I'm hopeful that will come. Actually, I don't even care if that comes. I just want there to be answers moving forward. So that's my only concern right now. We had another question from Archer452. What's up, Archer? I saw a clickbait podcast claiming Marcus Freeman hasn't won a big game. Why is the people constantly moving the goalposts? Why do they retroactively reduce the big games you won to not be big games? I mean, why, Archer? Because you already said it, right? It's clickbait. Marcus Freeman needs to take it to another level. It needs to be more consistent, but they beat a USC team this year that was undefeated coming into that football game, right? And number 10 team in the country. You can look back at it now and say, they've lost 3 football games and be like, that really as big a game as you thought? And you could have that conversation. I would be open to that conversation. But to say that wasn't a big game at the time would be false, right? It would be false. Last year against Clemson, a team that won 11 games still last year, and competed for the ACC or whatever, like they went into that football game undefeated against Notre Dame, or undefeated coming into playing against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame beat and won that game. So to say he's won no big games is false. That was 2 top 10 wins at the time of the game that Coach Marcus Freeman has won already, but it needs to be more consistent. There's no doubt about it. Like, you need to find a way to win against Ohio State this year. You need to find a way to beat Clemson again this year. Like, you still need to be more consistent with it, but they are moving the goalposts a little bit. They're cherry picking just kind of their opinions because, like you said, they want a reaction, and he got a reaction. You're talking about it on a podcast right now, man. You are the problem, Archer. I'm saying very jokingly. Don't take that. I know you won't, but yeah, they're trying to get a rise, and they did. So they did. Not out of you necessarily, but they got a rise out of someone, I'm sure. I'm sure there was someone that didn't like that answer at all. So shall see, man. Beezer 12, washing beer. What's up, Beezer? Have you heard anything, Parker, as a leader coach? Can he motivate the offense that is struggling for the rest of the season? I have only heard, and I can only say this from the people that I spoke to before he was a fit. Well, he had already been announced behind the scenes, but publicly announced. I had talked to a lot of former players, especially about Coach Parker, and just kind of getting insight into him. And I know Brian's talked to a lot of people throughout the process. And I've never heard anything negative about Jared Parker as far as the respect that the players give him and the leader that he is. I've never heard anything about that. My biggest question about Jared Parker is, was he given the job too quickly or too early? That's my question about Jared Parker. Do I think that he has had a lot of up and down because he's not a great leader, or that the players don't respect him? No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. But I do think that is obviously a question. So we'll obviously see moving forward as far as, can you get the offense to a point that you need to get to? But I don't think it has anything to do with leadership or respect. I just don't see that. So yeah. Can he motivate the offense that is struggling for the rest of the season? We shall see. We shall see there moving forward. I would like to believe it. I am hopeful, but I have no idea. I hope that we see a team over the last 3 games offensively that comes out and plays with fire, plays with excitement, and it's just a joy to play the game, man. That's my biggest thing, is that we lose sight of a lot, that this is a kid's game, that these are 18 to 24-year-olds. I hate now extending it to 18 to 24 because of the COVID stuff, but that will be regulated soon. Don't worry there. But these are still kids for the most part, or young men, however we want to phrase them. And they're playing a kid's game. So I hope that we see some of that vigor, that excitement. I want to see it, man. I want to see it, because I miss it. I miss it. I would give anything just to go back and play a game again. Give anything. And so I think that I hope that we will see more excitement to play the game offensively, especially. I'm very hopeful for that. All right. We had Nathan Milton who said, what are the predominant types of offenses in college football? What are the major differences in fit, and which fits Notre Dame's current roster best? Well, I think that one that fits Notre Dame's current roster is the one that they're running. It's just that I would like some tweaks to a lot of it, right? And so that is a pro style offense, but it's more of it's got college implementation to it, right? When I think of pro style, you're going to think of a lot of under center. You're going to think of a lot of heavy tight end usage. You're going to think of like reduced alignments. Like, that stuff could work for Notre Dame. So I think that the spots that you look at Notre Dame and say, where are they always going to be strong at? Offensive line, tight ends, running back to a degree. That stuff works in a pro style type of look. But I think that the evolution that this offense needs to take to the next level, Nathan, is that I would like some more spread elements filtered into here, right? Would still like to see a more 11 personnel at times, some 21 personnel. I want to see kind of a different variety of the offense. It's not the scheme, though, necessarily. I want to see variety more. I want to see you open up this passing attack and making it more diverse and more exciting and more creative. Like, that's the issues that I have with this offense right now. That's really what I want to see. As for what you're going to see offensively in college football, you're going to see some pro style elements. You're going to see two different types of spread. You're going to see a college spread, which is more of like the Chip Kelly type of spread, where you're going to see a whole lot of multi-wide receiver alignments. You're going to see a lot of shotgun. You're going to see some zone read off of it, some power read stuff. You're going to see more of a pro spread type of look where that's more garnered to. You're still going to run some 11 personnel, but you're still trying to spread the field, but you're spreading it with a little bit more pro style elements. You're still a heavy run team. You're going to run some gap scheme as a run game. So I think there's different versions, but overall spread, pro style, there's just different types of pro and spread that work through it. But I think Notre Dame's pro style offense, I think, can work. It's just, I need it to be a little bit more diverse and a little bit different. There's a couple tweaks that I would make extensively for it. So shall see. But a great question, as always, Nathan. As always. We had Mike Ho. And Mike, if it's pronounced Huff, can you just put it in the chat? I don't want to call you a hoe if it's not how your name's pronounced. So I apologize, man. I know you guys don't like the portal. I believe we should use the portal more. Go get me some dudes. It's been proven to work. Look at Louisville. You don't need 70 kids. Get 10 difference makers. Mike, I just wanted to bring this up because I am definitely not against the portal and acquisition through the portal of talent. And I know Brian isn't as well. I just think that we need to understand that there are some stipulations to how Notre Dame can use the portal, right? It's going to be grad transfer more than likely. And it's also going to be some younger kids occasionally that are still early on in their college career as far as from the academic piece, that they're able to transfer, the different credits and everything more easily. If you're a 2 to 3 year person into a program, it's just going to be hard to consistently make that transition. So as of right now, graduate level transfers and then early college kind of experience, that's more of what can transition to Notre Dame. I believe that Notre Dame is using the portal well. Could they use it a little bit more in certain areas? It's possible, but I'm actually not too against the portal usage, because I think that there are some limitations to what Notre Dame's moving toward, like what they can pull from the portal. Now, if Notre Dame over the next couple years, the admissions side of things says we're going to open things up and get you some more availability to undergrad transfers and things are a little bit easier, then I'm all for it, man. Like, go out and acquire as much talent as you can that makes sense for you. But I just think those limitations kind of limits the numbers that you can take in the portal. And also, I think we need to remember, because I saw a post on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com that was talking about like Notre Dame should take like 3 wide receivers in the portal this offseason. I'm just like I'd be open to a wide receiver potentially if it's the right type of guy, but you're not going to take 3 because you don't have that many spots available to you. Like, what am I going to do with? Am I going to tell 2 guys like, hey, you're not on the roster anymore, beat it, like go transfer? Like, it's bad business, right? Like, I think developing from within is still the mindset that Notre Dame needs to have. But if they make the undergraduate transfer opportunities to Notre Dame a little bit easier, would I explore more? Potentially. But it's not necessarily something that I think that is flawed with Notre Dame right now, if that makes sense. Because I think that there are limitations to how they go. Mike had another one back-to-back here I want to pull up. So I don't necessarily believe this is what Marcus Freeman believes in offensively. Do you think he's doing this based on the talent he has? It only has 2 classes here so far. It's a fascinating question. Is it possible that Notre Dame coming into the season and Marcus Freeman coming into the season thought that they were limiting factors offensively, and that's kind of why the philosophy is the way it is? I guess it's possible, Mike. I just think that it's a little bit nearsighted if that is the full reason for it. Because what's the reason? If you don't think you have talent in certain spots, that's cool. But what's the reason to not use Jeremiah Love more? Like if you're looking at the wide, like let's use wide receiver position for instance, right? I'm a little bit down on the wide receiver position right now, obviously. If you don't think though that the wide receiver position has the guys you need, there's different ways to supplement playmaking ability and speed to the table. One of them would be getting Jeremiah Love on the field more, getting Jadarian Price on the field more, getting Eli Raritan, now that he's healthy, on the field more in different alignments. And Notre Dame's not doing much of that, right? So the philosophical stuff, I think, can have some merit to why you're running the offense you do. But for me, it's like, but if you really are down on like the wide receiver position, for instance, why would you not use other personnel looks differently to try to get supplements and get some speed on the field more, some playmaking potential? If offensively, I look at my line and say, you know, my interior offensive line stinks. So I'm going to utilize more jet, more outside zone, more, you know, slides off of play action and that type of thing to kind of supplement to get to the ball to the perimeter more. That would make sense. But I don't see that consistently. I feel like when the going gets tough, Notre Dame's like, I'm going to run inside zone, or I'm going to run downhill and, you know, tailback dives and just try to get vertical with it. And so that offensive philosophy, I think, doesn't mesh well with what you would perceive the limitations to be for Notre Dame. So I just think it's a flawed perspective of what your team is in general right now. So I want to see that evolution happen. I don't necessarily buy that it's fully because Marcus Freeman knows that his wide receiver unit isn't good. His interior offensive line stinks. I don't agree with that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it could have some merit, but I don't fully buy into it, if that makes sense. So, all right, let us now go to John Lacey. John with the question. I don't disagree. It's bigger than the offensive coordinator, wide receiver, and offensive line coaches. What exactly does that mean? Which things specifically are deeply rooted that must be fixed? Well, we talked about it, John. I don't know if this question came in before we kind of talked about it a little bit more, but I wasn't even saying that it's necessarily a coaching issue fully, right? Like I think that there's some things that need to be evaluated, obviously, but I think that structurally what I want to see moving forward, because Brian texted me, just kind of like what his thoughts were and what the points were he wanted to talk about and asking kind of my perspective on it. And for me, it's more like, the bigger issues is that I just don't think there's any juice or energy around this offense. I don't think that they fully believe in what they're doing offensively from a player perspective. I just don't think there's a deep belief, because if there was a deep belief, I think that you would see more energy. I think you would see more juice. And I'm just kind of missing that layer. And I think the other part of it is that I want to see the competition be fixed here, right? Because I just don't think there's any reason to not use the assets that you have. I mean, if guys aren't performing, guess what? There's other players on this roster that are arguably more talented, right? Like if I'm looking at an offense right now and I'm saying comparison level, that's wide receiver, my outside receivers aren't getting it done, right? They can't create separation. They can't win vertically. They can't create explosives. Well, then why wouldn't I give Braylon James a chance? Right? Like, why wouldn't I give him a chance? So I think there needs to be an openness to competition. I think there needs to be more energy pushed into this offense. That's my biggest thing. I'm not even talking about the coaching issue, because structurally, I don't hate the offense for Notre Dame. I dislike a lot of the passing game principles, and I think that there is not an aggressive nature to them early downs. I think those are the two of the biggest fixes that I would make right now. Right now. That's what I want to see. Structurally, that's what I want to see. But I wouldn't fully change the offense. I'm not like, fire Jared Parker, go get me a full spread coach, and we're good to go. No, I want them to be more aggressive on early downs, first and second down. Stop with the 2nd and 10 runs. I hate you. Stop doing it, please. And I want the passing game to be more exotic. I mean, more creative. I need to see them get guys open more consistently. If guys are having trouble winning one-on-ones, you know what we could do? We can manufacture the ability to get those guys open. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see in this offense. Those things will show me that there's growth happening. That's what will show me. Andre Tonsel. What's up, Andre? We're like a donut hole. We have everything around it, but we don't have anything to plug in the middle, the quarterback yet. Andre, I understand where you're coming with that, because I know we've talked about the quarterback position has not played well. Sam Hartman has not played well the last few games, but I think that there are other flaws outside of the quarterback. I think saying the statement you did is just kind of isolating that like quarterback is the main issue. And I don't agree there, right? I think that there is a lot of different layers to this issue offensively for Notre Dame right now. And I think saying that would say that the wide receivers are playing well, the offensive line's playing well, but you just don't have that quarterback to make it work. And I don't see that personally. The interior offensive line is a problem right now. Wide receiver as a whole is a problem right now. Offensive play calling in certain spots is a problem right now. Philosophy is a problem right now. There are multiple issues here. I don't think that we can isolate it to one thing, and I definitely don't think it's just quarterback. I don't accept that premise. I can't. All right, so let's get us through the last few here. Thank you all, guys. Guys, thank you so much for sticking with me today, man. I know Brian wasn't feeling that well, so thank you for sticking with me, as always. Rocket Got Robbed says, if it's me, I am in the portal for wide receiver, a dude, and hopefully his presence will open things up otherwise. Rocket, I would be open to a wide receiver in the portal, depending on what the numbers are on the roster right now. I would be open to it. Someone mentioned the wide receiver from Boise State, who I think his name is McAllister. I wouldn't be in on that guy, because I think that he doesn't bring a layer to your offense that you're missing. Like, you already have big guys. You already have guys that, can win with their size if they're playing well. Like, I think that Notre Dame needs to find, if they're going to hit the portal, they need to find something that they don't have right now offensively from the wide receiver position. And that is big time speed, more of it. And that is ability to win in and out of breaks with explosiveness and acceleration. That's what I need in the portal. So if there's a wide receiver there that wants to come to Notre Dame, that is explosive and can run, bring him there. I'd be completely okay with that. But I think that you need to be very particular with the type of receiver that you want to bring, right? Because more than likely, I know Jordan Addison hit the portal last year, but more than likely you're not going to get a guy like that you're describing. You need more to find the style of the receiver that you need in the portal if you do go that route. So I'd be open to that, depending on what it looks like. We had a question for We Are Not Marshall. He said, can we stop with the Blake Fisher as an elite left right tackle? It's Joe Alt and everyone else on that line. I mean, my first question for We Are Not Marshall would be for you is, who has ever said that Blake Fisher was an elite right tackle? Has that been a narrative that's been, I'm genuinely asking, I'm not insulting you in any way. Like, is that something that's being pushed on Twitter? Is that something that's been pushed in the comments? Like, I don't know where that comes from. I don't. I have always been on the conversation of Blake Fisher is a very talented offensive lineman that has never performed up to his talent level. That's always where I've been with Blake Fisher. I also do think he's probably a guard. I do. I think he can play right tackle in the college level, and he can play it on a pretty good level if he's developed more. I agree there, but I delve deeply into the NFL draft space, and I can tell you that the NFL, I think, views him more as an interior player than he does an offensive tackle. I do. So does he need to continue to evolve, and is there a position that might be more suited for him? Yes. But is he an elite level offensive tackle? No, he's certainly not. He has not been an elite player this year. No doubt about it. He was not an elite player last year. I'm just not sure where that narrative is coming from. So I'm genuinely asking. I don't know where that narrative comes from, that Blake Fisher is an elite player for Notre Dame, or has been an elite player for Notre Dame. The only elite offensive lineman, to your point, that Notre Dame has is Joe Alt. He's the only elite one right now. Only one. Blake Fisher is good at times, below average in others. Zeke Correll, a little bit of the same. And the two guards have been very up and down as well. I think the whole interior, honestly, like, I think we hyper focus on the two new starting guards. We hyper focus on the guards, and we just kind of skip over Zeke Correll sometimes. I don't think Zeke Correll's been very good this year, guys. I mean, I'm very honest. I don't think he's been great this year. I think he's been okay in spots. Like, I think against Ohio State, Zeke Correll had a good game. But more often than not, I think he's been a little bit up and down, right? So, and I just wanted to hit on this real quick. Josh Phillips just had a comment. He just said, well, beginning of the season, he was projected to leave for the NFL along with Alt. Josh, I would just say, where is that being projected at, right? This is my biggest advice to everyone, and not even necessarily to you, Josh, for this point, is that stop reading mock drafts and media push stuff as far as who's going to leave early and who's projected to be here. Someone said this early. Someone said this a couple games ago that or a few weeks ago, that someone had, I think it was NFL Draft Buzz, which I actually respect Matt Buzz over at Draft Buzz, but said that Blake Fisher had a 3rd round NFL grade. No, guys, he doesn't. He doesn't have a 3rd round NFL grade. The writer or the evaluator over at NFL Draft Buzz put a 3rd round grade on Blake Fisher's film. That does not mean that that the NFL sees it the same way. And Josh, for what I'm almost positive, and I can verify this with Brian about this, the anticipation was if Blake Fisher takes a massive step forward, then maybe he could leave early, right? But there was never a foregone conclusion. Like Joe Alt had to regress to the highest of level or get hurt if we were going to look at him and be like, oh, he's going to come back for 4th year, right? For Blake Fisher to have left early, he needed to take a massive step forward, and that just didn't happen, obviously, right? So for the people out there that are still kind of contemplating in their head, like, is Blake Fisher going to leave early for the NFL? If he does, man, I think that is a very bad decision. I don't think he was advised well at all in that situation. So the 3rd round draft grade that was supposedly on Blake Fisher, take that from a grain of salt from a media perspective, right? There's only a few guys in the NFL draft space that you should take seriously from where the buzz is. And that's Dane Brugler over the Athletics, the best one, in my opinion. He will give you it straight. And a lot of his rankings are associated with what he's hearing on the NFL side. He's talking to scouts and trying to put grades on him that way. But there are other guys that you just don't need to listen to if you want an honest opinion about where a guy's draft stock is. Like, that just isn't where it is, right? And I mean, I had the answer all offseason about like, Sam Hartman is going to be a 3rd round draft pick or a 2nd round draft pick. I'm just like, guys, like, he had a 6th round grade from the NFL coming into this season. That's where he was. He was coming back because he wanted to fight back to be hopefully maybe a late day 2 pick. And obviously that has not happened, right? So media driven draft takes or evaluations, take it with a grain of salt. Mock drafts, especially, guys, don't talk to me about mock drafts, man. Don't do it. Especially preseason mock drafts, where it's like, that is just throwing darts at a dartboard. Do not do that, okay? Do not. I promise you. They are always wrong. Always wrong. And there's also some sites that are much more reputable than others. All right. Like PFF, for instance, love the data collection. Think it's very cool. Think it's a really good site overall. But the PFF mock drafts are driven off of their draft grades, right? They put guys in there that are grading out really well. It doesn't mean they're a great prospect. It doesn't, right? It doesn't. It just does not. So just make sure you're understanding of who you're asking for that type of information, right? And yeah, so yeah. All right, so let us go next to Josh Miller says, if Tyler had stayed, would you make the change this week? Tyler had stayed. So if Tyler Buckner's the quarterback for Notre Dame and he's not playing well, would I have made the change? I mean, if Tyler Buckner's not playing well, would I have made the I mean, I think about it. Yeah, I would think about it. Guys, nothing's off the table right now. I personally wouldn't bench Sam Hartman for I wouldn't bench Sam Hartman for the Wake Forest game because I just think it's just fundamentally a bad look. But I mean, would I if Tyler Buckner wasn't playing well, would I potentially make that switch? Yeah. Am I still thinking about it for Sam Hartman? Yes. I'm evaluating everything right now because it's broken. It's not fixed. Notre Dame needs to find some answers. So, yeah, it's a decision that I would definitely be on the table. Would I necessarily bench? It depends on how he played, right? Like if you're 7-3 with Tyler Buckner right now, did they play poorly? Did he play okay? Like I don't know what the answer to that is. So it's a interesting question, but one that I just think need a little bit more there, right? To how players are playing and what the issues are and that type of situation. We had a question from Fighting Mike 87 says, which opportunity has been wasted more by the opposite side of the football? Caleb Williams being of USC's defense or Notre Dame's defense being of Notre Dame's offense? I mean, it's USC's defense, in my opinion. Let me rethink that for a second. Yeah, no, I still think it's USC's defense because USC's offense outside of the Notre Dame game is a very good offense. I mean, every single week they score and they score and they score. I mean, you had to score 50 points against Cal to win a football game 2 weeks ago. You scored 42 points against Washington last week and you lost by 10 points. I mean, that defense has been atrocious for USC over the last couple of years. I think that both sides of this question have been stunted, but I mean, USC's defense, I think, has just been such a train wreck because I just think of it that way because Notre Dame's offense hasn't been a train wreck fully. It's been bad in certain situations, but it hasn't been a train wreck. USC's defense has been bad, guys. Like, it's been overall just an awful unit for a couple years now, and especially this year. I mean, yeah. So I think USC's defense has been the bigger issue, in my opinion. All right, so let's get another question. We only have a couple more here. All right, we had Arrow 520. What's up, Arrow? Says, is Micah Gilbert more of a big slot or an outside receiver? I think he could play both. I think he could play both, Arrow. Actually, I think that his junior film spoke to me more as a big slot, but I think he's shown a little bit more burst this year as a senior, so I could see him being a boundary guy as well. So I think that he can be a little bit of a movement-based player. I think he has more explosiveness and acceleration than like Jaden Thomas does, for instance, who plays a lot into the boundary this year when he's been healthy. So I think he could play in the boundary. I think he could play in the big slot. I think that Mike Gilbert can do a little bit of everything. I think he could do a little bit of everything. So he could definitely play outside. He could definitely play in the slot, in my opinion. Last question, unless we have anything that kind of pops in late. And again, guys, sorry if I don't get to everything. All right. Cole Barker says, how many guys have stuck out to you to get drafted so far this year? So guys that I think are draftable for Notre Dame right now, based upon how they've played. I think Sam Hartman is borderline at this point. You know, he came in with mid to late day 3 grades from the NFL this year. So could he get drafted late? It's possible, but he's a borderline guy. I think that Audric Estime is going to get drafted this year if he declares, which I anticipate him to. Mitchell Evans, I bet, would get drafted if he declares, but I don't think he's going to declare because of the injury. I think Joe Alt gets drafted. Obviously, Joel gets drafted top 10 in the 2024 NFL draft. I just don't think any other offensive lineman makes the plunge. Like if Zeke Correll makes the plunge, I don't think he gets drafted. Blake Fisher would maybe get drafted as a day 3 dart throw right now, but I don't anticipate him leaving early. I just don't think he's played well enough to leave early as of now. Defensively, I think Riley Mills would get drafted. I think Howard Cross would get drafted. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a borderline guy. He could or he couldn't. It's a borderline guy for me. I'm not sure any of the linebackers get drafted, and I'm not sure all of them declare either. Cam Hart definitely gets drafted. I think he gets drafted probably in the top 100 if his medicals check out okay. And I think that Xavier Watts, if he declares early, gets drafted. And I think that he gets drafted pretty early, a lot earlier than people think. So I think that he might also be a top 100 pick. So I think Cam Hart, Xavier Watts, if he declares, definitely get drafted. Have questions with the linebackers. I think Howard Cross, Riley Mills get drafted. I think Joe Alt goes very high, obviously, in the draft. Audric Estime gets drafted. That's 6. And Mitchell Evans is a wild card guy. I mean, some guys have done it before where they declare even though they're working off of injuries. I would probably anticipate him going back to school. So I'll say 6 guys get drafted if Xavier Watts leaves early for the 2024 NFL draft. That's kind of how I see it right now. Folks, thank you so much for joining me on today's mailbag. Make sure before you leave, if you can please like, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell. As always, it is very much appreciated as you guys join us for a Notre Dame, a little bit of Notre Dame talk. Make sure you also, if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, hit that notification bell. Also, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. It goes to boards.irishbreakdown.com for your latest recruiting and team intel. We'll be back again very soon. Thank you all for joining us today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.